All righty. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Thanks for joining us from all around the world for this special Guesty virtual meetup. Today, we're going to be talking about the hospitality algorithm, how we can build for consistent excellence. For those of you who haven't had a chance to meet me, I'm Dave Angotti. I'm the chief evangelist here at Guesty. But today's not about me at all. It's about Jeremy. Jeremy's the founder of Breezeway. That's a property operations platform that delivers the best service experience for both guests as well as homeowners through its combination of deep learning technology, robust property data, smart messaging, mobile task first management, or mobile first task management and all this other stuff that it does. If you aren't familiar with it, definitely check it out. Jeremy's not new to the industry, though. He first founded FlipKey, which was later acquired by TripAdvisor. And I oftentimes talk about how the people I bring on these webinars are people that I know well. I don't just put anybody in front of you. So, like, how well do I know Jeremy? My fun story about Jeremy is a couple years ago. I've known him much longer than that, but a couple years ago, we were in Tel Aviv after Guesty Val and after the party. And we wanted to keep the party going. We had some Guesty customers, some team members there. We happened across this little like fast food pizza joint that happened to serve beer. And we talked them into basically an open tab, cranking music, and we turned it into a dance party in Tel Aviv. And all the people walking by the outside of that pizza shop had no idea what was going on. So this is the kind of friendship I have with Jeremy. We aren't afraid to talk business. We can get down into technology, but then at the end of the day, we can have a beer, do a dance party over pizza as well. So I want to give everybody an idea of how things are going to run today. So this is the agenda. We're going to do a few opening slides. Then we're going to have our conversation together. We'll be interactive between Jeremy and I, and then we'll open it up for questions from the audience. You can feel free to put those questions in anytime, and I'll weave some of those in as we're going. So before we get started, I do want to introduce Guesty if you aren't familiar with what we offer. So these numbers are impressive, right? And we have the customers in 90 countries, almost $500 million in funding. But why does that matter to you? And what I would argue, I just had a chance to interview Amiad, our CEO and founder, on stage in Mexico City. And I would argue that these numbers matter to you because he started doing something similar to you, and he still leads the company. He cleaned toilets. He talked about that, how he cleaned toilets and cleaned properties and rolled up his sleeves and did a lot of the tasks that you and your team are doing. Now he's running this huge technology organization, but I would argue that the $500 million in funding that we've received almost, that's not the key to this. The key to that is it's filtered through somebody that intimately understands what it's like to drive results for your business. Higher ADRs, better accounting, better distribution, operational efficiency. And that's part of why we're bringing in people like Jeremy today. Now, we do have something for businesses of all sizes. If you're just starting out, great. We have something for you, all the way up to the largest property managers in the world. On that topic of operational excellence, we just surveyed 600 property managers and short-term rental managers from around the world in our latest STR Pulse report. We'll share the link of this report later on. But what we found is 73% of guests rank reliability and consistency as their very top deciding factor when they're choosing a property. Now, that makes sense, right? When we go to a property, we want to know what we can expect. The scary part of that same report, half of the people surveyed said they don't have the systems in place today to deliver that. So think about that. We understand 73% of people understood that this is the key factor in driving reservations and profits and results for their short-term rental companies, yet half can't do it. So we're going to be talking about that today, but I did want to talk about how hospitality isn't just built on these moments of excellence, but rather on systems that make these moments repeatable. And I wanted to tell a story about my family and I. We were at a high-end rental in Hawaii, on the island of Kauai. We just checked in, and we were having a good stay, maybe even a great stay so far. The property was beautiful, everything was nice. There was even like a pineapple and a welcome note in the property when we arrived. So then we head down to the beach the next morning. And I get a text from the property manager, and the text just says, "Hey, how is everything going with your stay so far?" Already, that's probably better than a lot of companies, right? And I just write back and I said, "Yeah, it's going pretty well. Thanks for checking in." The next thing that was asked, though, was the game changer. And this can be processed out, it can be systemized. And they said, if I had a magic wand that could make your stay better, what would you wish for? What would be your wish? I'm a bit of a coffee snob. They had some coffee machines in the property, maybe even good ones, but I wanted a specific kind of espresso maker. And I'm like, well, since you offered, and I just wrote it back. When I got back to the property 90 minutes later, that was in the property. Now, this is excellent, excellent customer service. And it was delivered because of a system. In reality, that might not have even been a human behind that message. That might have been a triggered message, but it elicited a response out of me of here is how you can deliver exceptional hospitality, unreasonable hospitality to me. So we're going to be talking through this and a bunch of other things about how we can delight customers, but then also how we can hit the bare minimums before we can even think about that today. And so that's what Jeremy and I are going to be talking about today: the systems, the tools, the philosophies of basically delivering consistency and creating brand power over time. So how can we deliver those basics to where we even have the right to deliver the espresso machine? I think is where this conversation starts. The foundation of basically delivering customer service. So that's where I'm going to bring Jeremy in. Jeremy, welcome. Thanks for coming today.
Dave, thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Awesome. I'm going to start with a question that I think is um, pretty foundational to everything. You've said that exceptional hospitality starts with getting the basics right. Why is operational reliability the foundation for everything else?
I think this is the hospitality algorithm convo talking about building consistency. I think it sort of starts with like when you think about why that operational excellence is necessary, you have to first think about like, very broadly like hospitality. What are we trying to do? In the story that you just told, you felt that really special hospitality experience because someone did something extra. There was extra effort that was put in. First of all, they asked you that question, right? Probably programmatically, but it's nice, makes you feel good, really clear. You're like, hey, this is good. Now they care. They care. Just by asking, how's your stay going? You feel like somebody actually cares for an answer, whether or not they were going to act on that or not. Then they did act on it, which is great, and even in a very unreasonable way, right? But at least they know, even if they couldn't have fulfilled that, they could have written back to you and said, like, David, thanks so much. Like, we actually don't, we looked, we can't get our hands on that. We can't get our hands on that coffee maker, but we love the feedback. And instead, we sent you a special, we sent you a special pound of coffee from the store down the street, right? You'd still be like, wow, that's pretty cool. I was heard, they couldn't do it, but I feel great about it. Um, but it requires this extra effort and human attention that turns that transaction into an experience. And it can happen whether you're staying at a really incredible high end property or just a regular property by someone showing that level of attention. But someone has to take that effort. And I think the problem is if you don't have the baseline set up, you have put yourself in a very impossible situation where you can't possibly act above and beyond. You cannot make space to take extra effort and actually dedicate human time to being responsive to someone because you haven't met the operational baseline. And the problem is, The problem is in our industry, the same thing that attracts everyone and makes it so special. Look at the pictures behind you and like cool properties. Like the same thing that is like the uniqueness of the properties. They're authentic. They're in special places. They're not cookie cutter. They're not owned by the same person. Um, most of the time. That portfolio and where these properties are located, half the time the attraction is the property is in this like beautiful spot. It's pretty hard to get to. That's probably why there aren't hotels there, right? So like all of that, everything that I just said, just supercharges your operational burden to actually meet that baseline. And if you're not thinking about how to optimize that, you put yourself like very far behind in reaching a hospitality experience goal.
Yeah, so when we look at our industry, depending on what report you believe, we're well over $100 billion industry now globally. And our disadvantage becomes that predictable experience at check-in, or maybe even the predictable experience when you open the hotel room door and know exactly what to expect and know there's a bar down in the lobby and a restaurant and the area that it's in. And so like I think about that, and I think even about the times maybe I choose a hotel versus a vacation rental. That's where really this whole idea of the hospitality algorithm, what to expect, kind of starts to come into play. And I would go as far as to say we can't focus on adding delight until we fix the fundamentals. Would you agree with that statement?
100%. I just did this it just came from a new employee onboarding call. And I was talking about how guest expectations have continued to rise. Brand new Breezeway teammate asked me a question. This was 20 minutes ago. And it's like, so, do you think that's just going to continue to happen? Is our guest expectations going to just continue to go up? I said, well, I think so. I said, we're not in the airline industry, so they're not going to go backwards. But they're at least going to stay steady. But what's actually going to happen is there's so much variability. That 73% stat, we really, as an industry, need to internalize that stat you shared at the beginning about reliability and consistency, because that's what holds us back. Is that the mental model that the average guest has for vacation rentals and short-term rentals is one of unpredictable, massive variability in quality. And the better we do to solve that, where people keep having great experiences and they can start to build a mental model of understanding what they're going to get and that it's going to be this quality experience, the better off we all are.
Yeah, and I was listening to a guy talk on customer service not long ago, and he said something that stuck with me. He talked about specifically how inflation is outpacing income today. And he said it was one of the biggest drivers on this expectation of a rapid increase in customer service because disposable income has shrunk as a percentage of total income due to inflation. And so they have less discretionary dollars to spend on certain types of products. And so they're still going to buy the gallon of milk and the gallon of gas. But the vacation rental or the hotel, they now place a higher expectation on it because it takes a larger percentage of their discretionary income. And so I think that like definitely pertains to what we're trying to accomplish today, but also at a broader scale, our industry needs to accomplish, which is like, how do we have almost like an inflation of the experience over time, an inflation in our customer service over time? And I think that starts with the table stakes, the things you have to deliver on. It's like we were talking the other day on this, and it's like if I drive with my family, my three kids to a vacation rental and you've delivered this exceptional experience. Maybe there's a handwritten note and a gift basket or microbrewed beer in the fridge, whatever it might be, and that door code doesn't work. Like that's just gonna piss me off when I finally get into the property because like I just want to be able to get into the property. And your exceptional customer service doesn't matter if you don't hit that baseline. So I was wondering if maybe you could talk through what that baseline actually looks like.
Yeah, I think, yeah. I mean, you're probably outside looking in and you're like, is there a note in there? Does that have my name on it? That looks like That looks exciting. I really want to get in. Yeah, I think that I honestly think um, we as an industry, and we're doing better. Like this industry is dominated by folks who, and the ones who are growing, the ones who have successful businesses are leaning into all the concepts that, we're talking about here and into this mental model. But people are paying attention to like the average mental model that you're describing of of a guest, right? Which is you're on your way to that trip with your family. You've booked this home. It's a new destination. You haven't stayed there before. So it's probably a new operator, new host or manager, and you're excited, right? We talked a little bit about and we'll get into this later, maybe the anticipation of going on the trip. But along with all that positive anticipation is this like pretty ugly, negative um, anxiety about, is this place going to be okay? Is it going to match the photos? Actually going to be clean? Am I kind of worried about bed bugs? Maybe. Am I going to be able to get in when I show up? Like, I don't know. Can I park? I got a boat trailer. Is that going to fit? I'm not really positive. Like, what's going to happen? And so I think we just have to, the baseline needs to take into account that mental model of the guest and what's going through the guest's mind. And I think it starts with like trying your best to alleviate those concerns. So the way you communicate, I think the operational flow, what we've seen over the years, and certainly not when we started Breezeway like 8 years ago, I don't think this was sort of the conception that like, or the perception that operation starts well before the stay. I think there was kind of the misconception um, years ago that it's like, oh, operations, like that's a turnover. I'm gonna get the property
Mhm.
ready, and
Exactly.
then I'm done. It doesn't work that way. Like the operational burden starts well before the arrival, much closer to like booking, so that you can start to build that relationship and then be reactive and start to alleviate some of that. So the baseline is, how do I get you prepared and feeling confident that this home that you booked, like lean into the anticipation on the trip and not the anxiety? How do I
So,
make sure when you go ahead?
yeah, yeah. So what does that look like? Like we just took a trip together. We were both just down in Mexico City for Guesty. Great conference, by the way, for anybody that missed it. I'm sorry. But like we were down there together. What does a property manager, maybe in Mexico City or wherever, um, do to deliver on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it would have been so simple, and like I didn't stay in a rental, I stayed in a hotel. It just would have been so simple to send me a quick message ahead of time, maybe a week before arrival. Like, here's where the hotel is. Like, let's get your bearings about the area. Like, here's our favorite restaurant. Here's a cool place where you could. Now, to the hotel's credit, when I did arrive, I did ask these questions. I got there at 2. I had an hour before Guestival, and I wanted to know the best place to go get some tacos. And they told me, and it was awesome. It was a great recommendation. But imagine if they had sort of like set that up. There was no interaction with me pre-arrival, which really would have made a difference and could have been, that really would have aided my anticipation. I would have been like, oh, this is awesome. Okay, I know where I'm going. I know what I'm going to do. I've got 2 hours before Guestival kicks in, and I'm situated. They didn't do any of that, and I think that's a missed opportunity. I think that's what it looks like. All the
Yeah, and
operators who
they
use
they
Guesty,
had
yeah,
they had the intel. They knew it.
they already knew.
They just didn't
Yeah,
program it and put it into a process where really that's engineering one time, this process that then takes care of every guest or every guest in this segment forever. And so, like, they missed that opportunity to plant this idea that this was going to be an exceptional trip a week out, right? People are anticipating these trips from the time they book them. There's a whole segment. We studied this back when I owned the OTAs. There's a whole segment that books their next vacation while they're still on vacation because they always want something to look forward to. How do we, so what we're talking about here is how do we make sure that guest can keep anticipating all the way up till time of arrival and make sure that they aren't disappointed. So I think that that's a perfect example what you brought up there in Mexico.
And what's super interesting about it too, now that we're talking about it, is that like by not doing that, they left it for chance that
Mm,
there wouldn't be a big, what if six people had been checking in and the person at the counter didn't have enough time to give me that attention and needed to get to the next person? Or, they really left it for chance that there could be that human interaction and I could get that recommendation and I could be telling the story right now, right? Like, whereas they could have programmatically like really removed that to set themselves up to know that they're in a better position for success. And I think that's really what we're talking about is like, that's the hospitality algorithm, which is like, how do you set up the process in the people in the very deep? This is also, I think, a misconception. It's like, again, it sounds pretty easy. Like, oh, you got to clean properties and make sure like that next person can come in. It is, yeah, 30 times more complicated than that. To
least.
do it right, to do it at least,
Yeah.
to do it right, to do it right. I mean, that is doing such a disservice to the amount of work that goes in. Um, and I think, but to be candid, Dave, you've been doing this a long time too. You've been in this industry. It's not shocking to think that like 10, 15 years ago, the operational mental model was much closer to that.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think though, if we go back to that email, if they'd sent that email to you, a couple things start to happen though. Trust is built through an email like that, right? And when somebody is coming to one of our units, we know that there's a trust problem at times. Whether or not we've earned this issue, our industry has earned this issue. They're afraid they're going to be locked out when they arrive. They're or maybe afraid of a missed clean or afraid that the property is not even going to be there. It could be a lot of different things. And what I've found is the more we communicate proactively, the more trust then is given to us in return. So what I think we're actually saying is like guest trust in the vacation rental segment is somewhat fragile. How do we make sure we protect that? How do we make sure they trust in our brand? Is that an accurate read on what you're saying there?
Yeah, 100%. And I think the line has to continue to be drawn though that like it's not just the communication. The the atomic unit of hospitality is work. It's
Mm,
actually like getting something, it's like getting something done, right? Like you cannot deliver it without getting something done. And if you communicate well, so you're alleviating some of that anxiety and like creating trust, holy smokes, you need to fulfill like what you're communicating about. And I think that's always we're getting better at it, but that's sometimes held us up, right? Like really hard to communicate that you're going to have a mid-stay. Like, David, would you like a mid-stay clean? Oh man, I better be
yeah,
able to do it. Yeah, if you say
yeah,
yes, I better
yeah,
be able to. I better be able to do it. Really risky to ask you like, you got a magic wand? What could be better? I better be in position that I'm at least going to respond very
yeah.
thoughtful. If not, take action and fulfill it. I better respond really, really thoughtfully.
Yeah. So on that topic, because I do have a lot of people that will sometimes ask me after I tell that story, like, "Hey, I'm afraid to do this thing, or I'm not going to do that, whatever." I always say you don't have to try this on everybody. You don't have to go program this up and send 500 messages with that. Try it on one person tomorrow and see what they say. Most people, when you ask a message like that, are reasonable. You can actually re-engineer the message. You can respond with humor. There's all kinds of ways we can deal with it if they're outrageous. If they're like, "Hey, drop me off a Lamborghini." Well, maybe it's humor and we go to the toy store and buy a little one and drop it off. But like, we can have fun with this. You don't have to roll it out system wide. But and then there might be different ways you ask the question based on the price of the property. This was not a cheap property we were staying in by any means. And so they could definitely afford dropping off the espresso maker in that instance. So I love atomic unit of hospitality. I just wrote that down, sent it to Guesty Legal. We're trademarking it real quick, as ours. No,
Before
but
this is
it's
over, yeah.
yeah. Before this is over, no, it's a great way to think of it. And so, like, I think of it in terms of how do we then leverage work for higher results using technology, perhaps. And so, um, as we as we program hospitality, what does that look like using a tool like Breezeway or using a tool like Guesty? Like, how do we reach scale?
Yeah, I think um, it's about how you take operations is complex. It's the most human piece of it. It's the most headache inducing, costly like part of your business, right? And it's the part that really relies on people. So you have to just lean so heavily into people and process. And that's what I mean. It's just like the reason Breezeway works so well, like we have great integration with Guesty. We focus dramatically on this part of the workflow and at a level of depth that can lead to more predictability for how you get that work done, right? So like if you have a different relationship with the property and the data around the property, you can tailor your work while still making it automated and keeping a baseline and keeping track of what's supposed to get done. All of this is just meant to put you in a better position and a better advantage to actually succeed and deliver on your promise, both to owners and guests, to get the work done and deliver. So it's about if you want to program it, it's about like, do I have the right people? Have I set up the right people with the right, very specific process to make sure they understand the expectations of what great looks like and that I've given them the tools where they can actually succeed and get it done?
Yeah, I'd love that. Um, so can you maybe just be specific on what those tools and processes might look like at a local level? So like somebody that's listening would understand, here's how we actually deliver this.
Yeah, I think you need to know. I think it starts with, technology agnostic as you're listening. It is like, what is my guest journey? Have I mapped out the guest journey and the areas where I want to make sure I am in position to do something special? Before I do that, like, what's my baseline on this guest journey? Am I going to communicate with everybody pre-stay? Am I going to send that message um, one day after arrival to everyone? If I am, how am I going to react to that? What is, I mean, I can make light of I make light of the turnover process as often a misconception that there's more work to it, but clearly that's a big piece of it, which is like, what's my relationship with this property? What needs to get done? Um, do I have different SOPs set up for a check-in versus a back-to-back? Am I going to switch that up and very quickly change my workflow based on the dynamics of what's happening that day? That's a very simple one that's often overlooked by new managers who are getting into the business. Like you got to switch the workflow if all of a sudden your time has been compressed and you got to cut a couple of corners on what you might normally do so that you can get through. Um, Maybe you're not deep cleaning the refrigerator. Maybe you're not cleaning the top of it, and you can keep your team like very, um, you know, prescriptively set up on what they should get done.
If you don't prioritize the workflow, they will, is a different way to think of it. And I don't want my cleaner in the moment at one of my properties deciding what they should and should not do if they're having to prioritize workflow. I would rather that decision be made at our level, maybe with the head of housekeeping that understands every task intimately, how long it takes, and what could and could not be put off. We all make that decision in the best of the best of times, not the worst of times, and then it's built into the process, it's built into the tool, and now that prioritization happens, in a vacuum over here rather than in the middle of war over here. It's like these turn days can be crazy in some markets where every property's flipping.
Yeah, and I think it's like I think you can audit your workflow as well and think about areas of disconnect. We hear this often from folks we're speaking to in the market where this is very common, right? I might be using one tool for task management and I'm communicating with all my people in WhatsApp. Okay, like each of those tools separately, it works. You can get it done. But imagine instead of communicating separately, your team is actually communicating about the work that they are doing, and all that communication is tied to the actual work in a stream where whoever has to answer is keeping track of it, and then you've got a record of whether or not somebody was struggling to get something done or a job was taking too long. So there's ways that you can react to that. So I think looking at the guest journey, that's a very tangible thing to do, and understanding what areas you want to prioritize. We could talk about that for ages if we have more time. Um, Thinking about where you have gaps, where there's disconnect in your process. Maybe your cleaners and your maintenance team aren't speaking as effectively as you wish that they did. So reported issues fall through the cracks. Like that's stuff that's very fixable that then sort of changes the dynamic and adds a whole bunch of scale to the way your people operate.
Yeah, on programming hospitality into technology, there's some pretty easy ways that you can get higher reviews and returns on investment for nearly forever with hardly any time or money invested. One of the ways we did it back during property management, we were in the Smoky Mountains, and nobody enjoys a rainy day on their vacation. They're wanting to be out at the theme parks, they're wanting to be on the hiking trails, whatever it is, walking the parkway in Gatlinburg. And so we knew the area inside and out. And we created this list of like the top 30 things to do on a rainy day. And when we would see rain was in the forecast, where it wasn't just going to be a drizzle for 20 minutes, like there's a whole day of rain, we would send an email to every single person in the market that basically was along the lines of like, hey, it sucks to have a rainy day on your vacation, but just so you know, our area still has tons of things to offer. And we broke it down by segment. Is it couples? Is it a family? And so we gave them all of these ideas to salvage that day, and people would leave us higher reviews. They would write back in and say, "Oh my goodness, thank you. I didn't know about these things. They weren't all obvious things like the Gatlinburg Aquarium. Some of these were like there was a community center that they go bowl at that nobody would have ever. I mean, it was taxpayer funded. They didn't advertise, but you could just go with no line and go bowling or go to the to an indoor swimming pool that people didn't know about. And so as people would receive that, we programmed that in, and then people would be happier with their stay and ultimately leave higher reviews. So there's a million different ways we can program hospitality into tech. I think that one question I have for you about this, though, as somebody that's leading a tech company, is like, where is that human led versus tech versus AI?
Yeah, I mean, I think um, there's an incredible balance that's necessary between that. I'll tell you, like, two things that come to mind. Like, one, um, so programmatic messaging is great at sending that. You can do that through plenty of tools, right? We could do, there's great tooling to do that. But I remember the days, I remember conversations with property managers a dozen years ago where they would be like, oh, I'm going to send a message during the stay. Uh, what happens when they write back? Like, I don't know if I want, do I really want them? I mean, I know it sounds, sounds absurd to say out loud, but I know there's some people who will hear this and they will either remember thinking that themselves, or they still might have a hint of that sort of anxiety. Like, what happens if people write back? And then I have to deal with like what the response is. And it's like, well, yes, this is something you should welcome. This is a brand opportunity. This is an opportunity to engage with the guests. And that's where you then make sure that you have space for the human element to take over, right? It's the same thing. Maybe it's rainy. Maybe you're writing that you're saying like, hey, um, we know you lost a day in the rain earlier this week. We can actually, there's a gap. We can actually offer you a night to stay extra. Let us know if you want to. You're offering that service. They do. They take you up on it. This triggers an entire workflow of changes and last minute changes that you have to take into consideration and move your staff around, move everything around. But if you don't have a system to do that, holy smokes, you're in a worse situation to be able to offer that. So I think programmatic makes a lot of sense. AI is great at that first response, and automated responses are getting better and better. When it comes to like hospitality service, think you have to start to. I think you have to be careful, and I think we're going to learn these lessons over the next year or two about just how much you can program away through AI your communication. Bulk auto messages to people that feel tailored, that's great. It's not even AI. Like those tools are here and well versed at accomplishing that. Somebody writes back and now you're going to auto respond. You just, it works really well for things like I forgot the Wi-Fi password. I've got a question about this. Hey, do you have a recommendation for this? Like known data can be really great for it. Wide open hospitality questions. I don't know. You ask that magic wand question. You write back whatever you did, and AI just kind of takes over. Probably not gonna. You're rolling the dice on whether or not that's really gonna feel great to the guest as far as you're responding. So I think you have to break it out. Think about a pool of communication that is automated, which adds leverage to your team, a pool of communication where AI responses are appropriate and it really works, and a pool of communication where this is your opportunity to shine and be human and actually deliver a human experience to people.
You know, I think you brought up something that probably hit a nerve for a lot of people. The idea that when they send a message, somebody might write back. And it's this idea that through proactive communications, you were talking about, it's like a dozen years ago or so, people were all worried, like, oh, what if they write back and they ask something? I would say that's still a fear when I talk to people today. And I believe this. I believe if you are afraid to proactively communicate with your guests because of a fear that they're going to write you back complaining about something, your business is broken. And I get that that might not sit well with people. And I get that there's a percentage of people, maybe even a growing percentage of people that are unreasonable on expectations, no matter what we do. But the flip side is those people are going to write you anyways. They're going to be vocal anyways. And are we going to ostracize our core customers, our customers that come year after year, and not deliver excellence to them because we're afraid of a small percentage now becoming more vocal after we send an email? If we are, we're broken.
Yeah, I think because if they don't write back, the worst case is you're just rolling the dice and you don't know what they're going to say in a world where reviews and your online reputation. This is a competitive market. Um, it's it's not becoming less competitive
No.
by any stretch, and so your online reputation, your reviews, your scores, how you're perceived is so important to your brand. It's important to owners when you're trying to win more owners or retain them. They're paying attention because it's a great way for them to understand. Like, is David really good at this? Should I be looking for somebody else to manage my home? So you just can't afford to not know what they would say. You'd much rather be informed, and you truly can't afford not to have these brand impressions. And like again, it's how we see the world. Like I said with that atomic unit comment, we see the world through this work that needs to be done drives hospitality. And if you can connect the messaging and the guide and after hours, I mean, this is why we focus on what we do, because we think if you can connect it better, it puts you in a better position to execute on that atomic unit and that work. And if you can do that, and then we can integrate with great solutions like Guesty to drive the reservation piece of the puzzle and drive other pieces of the workflow that Guesty does, it ends up helping clients be in the best position to optimize across their entire business.
How can guest users, we have a lot of guest users on here, how can they benefit from the deep integration that we have in Breezeway? And maybe what's like one thing in particular that Guesty users benefit from Breezeway, that maybe even other PMS users that use Breezeway can't get access to.
Yeah, I think you benefit you benefit at the very highest level um, from partnering and working with a company like Breezeway that focuses on this piece of what is a very complex workflow for property managers, right? You're supposed to be great at marketing. You're supposed to be great at accounting. You're supposed to have all this local knowledge. You're supposed to be an incredible operator. You're supposed to do owner relationships. Like you're pushed across a very broad spectrum of disciplines. So you benefit from a company that focuses on this operational piece of the work that you're doing by partnering with someone like Breezeway. And we've had a long-standing partnership with Guesty and a commitment to a deep integration from Guesty. Guesty as a product has invested significantly in their API in ways that not every property management software system has. So by having a very advanced API and working closely with Breezeway, it enables a deeper level of connection across the Guesty platform. So to be tangible, like maybe one tangible benefit of that among many is you can set very granular property status rules within Breezeway, which can help keep your team aligned and you'll know exactly what's happening. And you can push and mirror those property status rules into Guesty and then use those property status rules in Guesty to trigger some other workflow in a different part of your Guesty system, right? And that deep connection ends up paying dividends for clients because they're truly in a position to optimize across a broad discipline of their business.
That makes sense. So one of the things I hear people talk about, a pain point being that I think Breezeway solves, but correct me if I'm wrong, is around 1099 or external vendors, along with in-house staffs or teams, and the managing those two side by side is that something that Breezeway can solve effectively?
Yeah, because we think about the relationship you have with we think about the relationship you have with the property, the work, and the people that are doing it. And so you can mix and match people on your staff, people from external vendors, people from 1099 contractors, and you can set up different rules for them. So say, for example, someone is they're not your full-time cleaner, or maybe they're just coming in and they do like some external maintenance work. Like they don't have to have a Breezeway account. They can interact with tasks and with work that you need to do just via magic link, but they can tell you how they're doing that work, and then they can report issues and pass that back into Breezeway so that the rest of your team, your actual staff, can handle it. So there's some nice fluidity with how you can set up service providers, 1099 contractors versus staff within the system and assign work and really split up and focus the work for each of them. Again, that's just a benefit from like, this is what we think about. It's like the deep workflows to how to like automate a bunch of this stuff.
So I want to switch gears here and move on from Guesty and Breezeway more to back where we started a little bit. And so I specifically want to think through, how do we build a overall hospitality framework if we have a $10,000 a night rental over here or an $80 a night rental over here? What are the elements that have to be present to build that hospitality framework?
Mm. The
A
first
nice
one, which is really
softball for
interesting.
you.
Yeah, exactly. Thanks for sending this one in advance. Uh, yeah, I think the first thing um, is, when I got started thinking about this after being involved on the marketing side of the business, what struck me was the relationship that a property manager or operator has with the property and how well they know the property and the opportunities that that should present. So, like, number one, like, if I'm your property manager and I help you as the owner understand my relationship with your property and how well I know your property, wow, have I done a really nice job like adding confidence to you about how well I'm going to take care of your property? Because I know it. Do you really want to switch and use somebody else who doesn't know your property? Probably not. Are you going to be a little more lenient with like ebbs and flows of revenue? If I know your property, I'm showing you that I care for it. Like, yes, I think you will. And clients tell us as much. Um, so it starts with the relationship with that $10,000 a night versus $100 a night property. And what do you know about that property? And then how do you leverage that knowledge about the property to change your SOP and your baseline of how you engage? So then, if you know that, that's part of your system. Is like, think about my relationship with the property, deep data profile about the property, what's in there. Then you can think about like, okay, well, what's the common denominator? What do I have to do if it's this small $100 unit, and what if it's 10,000? So I've got my standard operating procedure that's like the common denominator of both, and then I can adjust that common denominator, maybe up a little bit, maybe even down a little bit if I have to. Yeah, maybe I'm taking something off the top for the really inexpensive property, and I'm really raising it up for the $10,000 a night property, which is very specific to that. So I'm building on top of my standard baseline to make adjustments depending on that property. This is very common because people have mixed portfolios, because you want to be able to attract both kinds of units, especially in the story you're telling about discretionary dollars. You know, if all you've got is super high end properties, I don't know, could be a good idea to diversify a little bit and grab something that's a little more approachable in these economic conditions, and then figure out what's the best way to do it. Because you also have to think about, which is a missed opportunity. I'm probably talking too much here, but like probably missed opportunity in this industry. We talk a lot about revenue management operations sort of separately. Like, can't wait for the day when we start to think about these things together and we start to think about profitability and the profitability profile of that $100 a night unit versus the $10,000 a night unit.
No, that's really good. So, just to kind of dovetail off of that, so we talked about managing the relationships, both the relationships with the property, the owner, the SOPs for the property, even the guest, all of those different relationships. Um, One of them is obviously the guest relationship. So, what is a recipe that somebody here could use to create wow moments with properties without breaking the bank?
Wow. There's a wow moment right there. Wow. I think I love your story. I love your story. Love your story at the beginning about the magic wand. I don't even think you have to go that far. I think, somebody says everything's good. It's like, hey, how do we just get, how do we get you to great? How do I
Yeah.
get you up to great? Or somebody said, well, I wish the property wasn't ready on time. Like, kind of got off to a bad start. It's like, okay, well, what can we do for you today? Like, I think that's a wow moment for clients. I think our conversation earlier, like the way you set up the relationship early with the guest, I think that's a clear wow moment. Um, and candidly, um, I think the average operator in the space still has some wood to chop uh, to get to the baseline. Like, I think consumers are, um, they expect a lot, but they're worried. And I think if you want to get them to wow, you know, focus on focus on your people and your process and get it nailed down so that things are done right, so that the property is well maintained, something isn't broken, you're being a little proactive in your maintenance schedules, you're making sure the turnover is done correctly, you're thinking about it from a people and like, what's this experience for the next person coming in? It's not a transaction, it's an experience. That will open up these wow moments. Um, but I honestly think like a lot of guests will be like, wow, this place was like really set up nicely. That's a wow moment. For the average short term rental, a wow moment is like, whoa, like these people executed to like a really clean standard of like preparing this property, thoughtful details. Um, there's there's dish liquid. There's the right level of supplies. I don't have to run right out to the store. Things are crisp and clean, well organized. Where's the TV remote? It's exactly where I think the TV remote should be, which is like close to the TV in an obvious place. Like, how many times does that happen? Not all the time, but it happens in a hotel. You know exactly where it's going to be in a hotel.
So what I just heard there, if I summarize it, is great execution on the baseline is the new wow. Like if we
I
can
think so.
execute well, and like to that point, I can't tell you how many times my wife likes to cook a lot. That like we will get to a vacation rental and we'll have to go to the store and buy pots and pans because there's like one little pan and it's all scraped up. And so we'll just, yeah, we may have flown there. We'll leave them in the property for the next guest. And we're not the kind of people that are going to leave you a bad review or anything like that. But it's just like it's a poor execution on the baseline. Maybe the view was wow, but the baseline was missed. And to that point, we actually had on the same topic, but just like with the operations, we had a person write in earlier and said that they've experienced really good engagement upon booking and check-in and fast engagement, but then there was no action on the backside of the request. And to me, like and the person goes on to say by day 2 of the 5 day stay, they were trained to basically understand there would be a fast response, a positive response, but no action would be taken. That's worse than not asking the question or not responding to the question. The worst thing you can do is tell a guest, "Hey, we'll be by later today with whatever you just requested," and then not show up. So, because
Yeah, a
yeah,
100%. I
yeah,
think it's the communication tied to the task is how I think we are overlooking the connection between the communication and the work that should be done, and how you can enable your team to actually do that and think about the work there. The other thing that was going through my mind was thinking about this is like, it's just like it's the little things like um, checkouts at 10, check-ins at 4, right? For almost everybody, plus or minus a couple hours, right? You're cleaning
yeah.
during the day. Who's How many times have you been on a vacation? Have you rented a home, and then you go to turn on the lights, and like the light doesn't work, or the light bulbs don't work because you're not cleaning at night. Nobody's checking all you're not checking all the lights. You're not replacing the light bulbs on a routine basis. Like it's little things that happen all the time. And one little thing like that, it's fine. The guest overlooks it. The next little thing that happens, eventually they pile up and then they want to talk to you about it and they want to get them addressed. And you're on a tight time frame to do that. I'd also say that like that's the thing that's a little different, which drives this operational burden, which is so underappreciated, is you book this one home, you fell in love with this home, you're anticipating it. Like we talked about in prep, like lots of excitement and value comes from that anticipation. I can't move you to another home. You're in love with that one. So that one needs to be ready. And then something happens because I haven't been on top of recurring maintenance. So I'm not really managing the experience for you so well. So something happens on day one and like, I need to fix it really quickly because you're only going to be there for a couple of days and I can't just like move you to the room next door or upgrade you because 20% of my hotel is vacant. It just doesn't work that way.
Yeah. So as we're kind of wrapping up here, and we're going to go to audience questions here in just a minute. So if you have a question out there, go ahead and get it in now. I do like to give our audience concrete takeaways on any of these webinars. So I'm going to come to you in a second, Jeremy. And the question for you is going to be, what piece of advice do you have for anybody on this call? It doesn't matter if they're a Breezeway customer, a Guesty customer, they could be on any platform, agnostic of that. What advice can you give them to make their operations better? And I'm going to go ahead and talk through just a few things that we've talked about today, but kind of encapsulate them as a takeaway. The first is we talked about pre-arrival emails. The guest is in this planning phase, this anticipatory phase. Make sure you aren't just sending the door code. I'm talking like a week or two before the door code. Start getting them excited about the stay. Talk about what they're going to be able to do in market while they're there with you. If you're a foreign destination, put somebody at ease on what that arrival process looks like. Um, the next one is program up automatic questions for every guest. And I don't care if that's like, hey, is there anything I can do to make your stay better? Or if it's the magic wand question, whatever it is, don't be afraid to do that. If you're afraid to do it, start small, start on 5% or 10% of your properties. But if you do that, your guests will tell you how to deliver better service. And then I think the final one is maybe a little more advanced, but create exceptional of content around disappointments, things like the rainy day, and send that out programmatically to every guest in market when that's happening. It could be traffic, and here's your shortcuts around the traffic, or here's the things to do when traffic jams happen, or it could be a rainy day. It could be different things for different markets, but make sure you're anticipating that your customer's having a bad day and solve it for them. So those would be my kind of takeaways there that we've discussed to some level here along the way. Do you have one or two, Jeremy?
Yeah, I mean, I think the main thing is like, which I think the industry needs to realize is that your operations create the guest experience. They are not separate. The guest experience is not communication. It is not messaging. The guest experience is driven by the work that you actually get done, because that is what the guest actually feels. So if you're an operator thinking about an immediate action you can take, I encourage you to think about how you have framed the business at the start at the very top and think about how you have framed your business, your relationship with owners, your relationship with guests, and how you drive that experience and internalize a little bit how connected that is to your operation. And then once you've done that, then do that guest journey audit and think about where are the touch points where you want to actually operate more effectively and deliver better on that experience. And then the last point being, how are you enabling your people to actually do that? Are you giving them the space? Have you set up the operational process to give them the opportunity to succeed so that they have some room to do that extra stuff and like actually respond to the messages and the communication that you're doing with your guests and owners?